Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Most of us really can't fathom the courage of Harriet Tubman. Here was a woman who had been born into the harsh conditions of slavery, who was frequently whipped, who saw three sisters sold off to other plantations never to be seen again, and who eventually fled to avoid being sold away herself. When she reached freedom, she again and again made her way south in order to lead others out to freedom. She risked capture countless times. She risked being returned to enslavement if she were caught. She risked harsh punishment. And still she went. Over a period of 8 years, she led 70 people to a new life of freedom. This week we are considering part of the Bible story that isn't there, but which has always fascinated me. There are people in the Bible story who encounter Jesus or have their lives changed by Jesus or one of his followers, and then the Bible story leaves them. I want to know what happened to them next. How did they feel about what was happening? How did their lives and actions change afterward? How did their lives reflect their new faith? Today we want to look at two amazing folks, Cornelius and Ananias. You can find the story of Cornelius in Acts 10, and to say he was a rare individual is an understatement. Cornelius was living in a town called Caesarea, which means it was so thoroughly Roman that it had been named after the Caesar. What's more, Cornelius was a Roman centurion, a leader among the soldiers. Roman soldiers were not known for their kindness and good natures, but Cornelius is described as a devout man who feared God along with his household, who gave to the poor, and who prayed constantly. One day while he was praying, he had a dream in which an angel of God told him to send for Peter to come to him. Now, before we go on, I need to remind you that Cornelius was a Gentile, and at this time the early Christians thought that the gospel message of Jesus was meant only for the Jews and not for anyone else. In fact, entering the house of a Gentile was considered unlawful for a Jew, and certainly rendered the Jew spiritually unclean. Now, back to the story. While the messengers were on their way to find him, Peter was in the town of Joppa, and Peter was hungry. While his food was being prepared, Peter fell into a trance and had a vision of a sheet coming down from heaven, and in the sheet were all sorts of unclean animals that Jews weren't supposed to eat. Peter was told to eat them, and when he protested, he was told, "What God has declared clean, you must not call profane." Then the messengers from Cornelius arrived, and Peter went with them. Long story short, Peter entered Cornelius' house, shared the gospel story with him, and was amazed when the Holy Spirit was poured out on Cornelius and all who heard him. And that's when Peter learned that the gospel message of Jesus wasn't meant just for Jews. God's grace and love were meant for everyone. I often wonder what happened with Cornelius after this. What impact did he have on those around him, on his community, because of his faith? And that same good news of Jesus has reached to us. What impact do we have on those around us and our community because of it? The other person today, Ananias, is the reason I began with that story of Harriet Tubman. Courage like hers, courage like that of Ananias, is rare. You may remember that in the very early days of Christianity, Saul was persecuting Christians. He would imprison or flog any Christian he found. He was on his way to Damascus to search for Christians there when he had his conversion experience. In a bright light, Saul met Jesus and was changed. he was also left blind. Those with him took him to Damascus, where for 3 days he sat in his blindness. Then God spoke to a Christian named Ananias and told him to present himself to Saul. That's where the courage of Ananias shows up. If it had been me, I would have said, God, are you crazy? This guy is persecuting people like me, and you want me to go and find him? But Ananias went. At great risk to himself, he went. It's amazing. And when he found Saul, they talked about Jesus, and Ananias cured Saul of his blindness. And Saul changed his name to Paul to reflect the new person he had become. And thus was born in Paul the greatest Christian missionary there has ever been. But what happened to Ananias after all this? We never hear from him again in the Bible. We know how these events changed Saul. How did they change Ananias? It's humbling to be the hands of God. What did that mean for Ananias? Maybe the question for us is, what does that mean for us? It may not be so dramatic, and we may not face the same kinds of risks, but God still works through us. How will we find God working through us today? Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.